Hello and welcome to Silver Griffin Makes a Thing, where we make whatever we feel like at the moment. Well, here we are in May. We all know what May is for, mermaids. So let's get right down to business with this month's MerMay project.
Hey.
Yes?
Aren't you, forgetting something?
What? Me? No, never.
No, don't try that with me. Tell them the rest.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. Mizutsune?
Right.
Go ahead and explain.
Okay. Right. So yeah, I totally did the next Monster Hunter High doll. It was Mizutsune, also known as the monster I based this whole planned series around. The monster I had a great design for and was super excited about doing, and she came out awesome. And I have zero footage for her. Apparently, at some point between filming Loki and filming Mizutsune, the phone that I do all my filming on decided to sneakily change a background setting and record all of my footage in some kind of high-efficiency codec that, for reasons unknown to any, is labeled as potentially not compatible sharing online or on other devices. I've seen some dumb things in my time messing around with recording and editing, and that one takes the cake. So in lieu of actually making a video for Mizutsune, I'll be putting together a brief slideshow on how I created her at the end of this video. Happy?
Yes, I'm very happy now. And don't worry, we all understand the artistic urge to show only your best work and to pretend that you never screw up or make mistakes, even if those mistakes are outside our control. But she's a fantastic doll, and she deserves to be shared with the world, especially since you went through all that work to make her really awesome.
Yeah. I'm just mad that all my footage got lost.
Yeah, and I get it, that sucks. But the doll is great, and you deserve to show her off.
Yeah, okay. So, I will. And she's gonna be great.
That's the spirit. Now have fun with MerMay.
Okay, so with all of that said, stick around till the end of the video to see a little of how I made Mizutsune. And for now, back to MerMay. If you have just somehow completely missed out on being on the internet for the past 6 years, MerMay was accidentally started by Tom Bancroft, the former Disney animator behind Mushu, when he posted a cute illustration of a couple of mermaids. It went viral and prompted him to do a month of mermaid-themed drawings, and then that went viral and just sort of became a thing on the internet, with artists of all sorts creating and posting mermaid-themed artwork throughout the month of May. This year, I actually remembered MerMay was coming up in time to go, hey, I should totally participate in that this year. And I just happened to need something to do in between Monster Hunter High dolls. So here we are. I'll be creating a mermaid doll based on Duchess Dianda Lorden from Seanan McGuire's October Daye books. I fell in love with this series a few years ago, and I've been toying off and on with making a couple of dolls based on some of the characters. The books are based in San Francisco and follow the adventures of the part fairy, changeling knight, and private investigator October Daye as she gets dragged into all sorts of wild adventures and plots that can only happen with a cast of wildly diverse immortals. Toby is sort of a found family magnet, which I absolutely love, and her cast of family members has only increased dramatically in the course of the 16 books currently published. Among these delightful supporting characters is Dianda Lorden, ruler of the Undersea Duchy of Saltmist, a Merrow married to a Dunya She who came to the sea to live at her side, mother of 2 delightful teenage boys, and an absolute boss whose first approach to conflict is punch it. And to think, she's considered a pacifist by undersea standards. I had this mermaid Laguna Blue doll hanging around in my stash. I believe she's from the Great Scarier Reef line, and she features this lovely cobalt blue tail. Originally, I had planned on another Toby Daye mermaid character, but after looking at how intense this blue was, I was concerned I wouldn't be able to change the color without a lot of painting that would probably scrape off over time. Dianda is described as having a jewel-toned tail in blue, green, and purple, which will require a lot less color changing. And this doll's skin is a bluish gray that will be easier to change to the right tone. With my character settled upon, let's get to work. The basic prep is business as usual. I start by cutting her hair. In order to tame at least some of the inevitable mess, I bind it up in a ponytail first before cutting. Once I've cut the hair as short as I can manage, I give her a soak in hot water to soften the vinyl and glue, then remove her head. I scrape out the remaining hair plugs. Then I clean off the factory paint with some pure acetone. And here I run into a bit of a glitch. Or at least at the time I thought it was a glitch anyway. This doll's tail comes with some pretty designs painted right onto the hard plastic, and it also features a very subtle scale texture that I don't want to mar too badly by sanding the paint off, so I go in with my acetone to remove the paint. This winds up leaving these sort of melted, shiny patches behind by the time I'd applied enough acetone to remove it, though. Not to be deterred for long, I clip off the existing tail fins and drill holes to anchor replacements with a hand drill. Note to self, invest in a table clamp. It will reduce the amount of time I spend trying to hold my drilled object in place while making the hole. That does it for the prep work. From here I jump into body modifications. Dianda is described as being quite curvy and muscular, and a basic Monster High doll just isn't going to cut it. Breaking out the Apoxie Sculpt, I thicken up her body and add some more muscle to her upper arms, and then add some to her bust. As a reminder, the resins in Apoxie Sculpt can be irritating to the skin. You really should wear gloves while using this stuff, especially if you're at all sensitive to the chemicals in it. I just hate sculpting with gloves on because I can't feel what I'm doing. Take care when using craft supplies and use any necessary precautions to keep yourself safe. Remember that glitch I thought I had earlier with the slightly melted plastic on the tail? Well, looking at her new proportions gave me an easy fix for that. I add a little bit more to her hip area to help round everything out. I don't go past the knee joint on the tail fin though, because I don't want to interfere with the posability. Once that is all cured, it's time to make scales. I'm just running these down the sides of her upper tail to better integrate the modifications. I roll out loads of tiny little balls of epoxy, then work them into place along the sides of her tail and give them a little bit of texture. She also gets some scale details added to her chest, upper arms, and face. With her ears, I was going for something sort of fishy and finny, but that didn't quite work out. They wind up looking more spiky, I think, but it's kind of cool looking, so I leave them as they are. The epoxy is all cured, so now it's time to paint. I give Dianda a warm orangey tan tone. She's described as having skin the color of clean sand, which is only middlingly helpful as a description. Sand comes in all kinds of colors depending on what it's made from. Some beaches have really white sand, some are more of a warm light brown. Beaches up in Washington State, where I spent most of my life, tend to have a grayish sand when they aren't just covered in pebbles. I do like the contrast the orange tan gives with the colors in the tail, so that's what I settle on. I paint the tail in shades of green, blue, and violet, using my more transparent paints to give the color gradients a little more depth. The scales on her body and face also get painted with these colors, though I add a layer of white before I do to help keep the colors clear, instead of being muddied by painting over the skin tone. Once the base colors are in place, I highlight the scales and sides of the tail in lighter tints to bring out the details in the sculpt. Before blushing or doing the face-up, I take some time to root her hair. For her hair, I'm using this metallic black nylon hair from the Doll Planet. I thought it looked kind of like moon and starlight glittering atop a quiet sea, rather fitting for our Merrow. Using a needle with the eye cut at an angle, I take a small amount of hair, hook it over the eye, and plug it into each hole in the scalp, starting along the hairline and part. Once all the hair plugs are in, I pour in some Fabri-Tac glue, making sure it coats all the plugs, and leave it to dry overnight. I really like how it looks all long like that, but she'll be getting a more book-accurate style later. I warm the neck hole and pop her head back into place. The scales on her face did pop off while I was rerooting because the pressure from the plugging deforms the flexible vinyl away from the rigid epoxy. No big deal, I just glue them back on once I'm finished and touch up any chip spots of paint. This is exactly why I put the head on first before doing the face-up. If I'd glued the scales back on and done the face-up, then put her head back on, I would run the risk of the scales popping off again, or the deformation of the vinyl cracking some other part of the face-up. Best to put the head back on now and make any minor repairs while the colors are all still flat and easy to match, rather than try to match subtle gradients and shading later on. After a couple of coats of Mr. Super Clear and covering her hair with an old sock, I blush her upper body and face in soft browns and pinks to give it dimension, then brush over her skin with a coppery Pearl X powder. Her tail, fins, and scales all get dusted with Pearl X powders too, in blue, green, and purple, and everything gets sealed in with more MSC. Because I'm using a matte finish MSC, the shimmer from the powders becomes more muted and subtle, just what I'm looking for. Time for the face-up. With my watercolor pencils, I sketch out the shape of her eyes and brows, start giving shape and detail to her lips, and refine the rest of her facial features. Every time I feel like the pencils aren't building up, I give her another spray of MSC to seal in my progress and refresh the surface. For her expression, I'm going with a bit of resting bitch face. Dianda is not unkind, but she is an undersea noble who holds her throne by strength of arms, and is pretty much always about 30 seconds away from punching someone. I want an expression that warns onlookers to not mess with her. I found a nice variety pack of Pearl-X powders on sale just in time to make this doll. I've been really excited for these. You guys know me and my love of shimmer and sparkle by now. I think every single one of my projects on this channel has incorporated the infamous interference pigments. Now I have even more glittery stuff to play with. I keep her makeup pretty subtle. Dianda is a very practical sort of character and doesn't strike me as someone who is especially elaborate with her makeup, unless she's having to bully land-dwelling nobles into taking her seriously. She gets a subtle purple eyeshadow, just enough to draw attention to her eyes. I also sketch out the gills on the sides of her neck and give them a bit of dimension. After a point, it's really hard to build up saturation and opacity with colored pencils, even with a new coat of MSC. At that point, I switched to acrylic paints and tiny brushes. Naturally, I add some blue interference paint to her eyes. Just because I got Pearl-X powders doesn't mean I'm going to cast aside my favorite paint. A last coat of MSC to seal things in, a bit of gloss on her eyes, lips, and upper body scales, and the face-up is finished. After everything is dry, I cut and style her hair, using boiling water to tame the poof and set the style. Then I cut her hair down to a cute bob with a bit of bangs in the front. Dianda's hair is pretty short. Long for her is just long enough to cover the gills on her neck, but she doesn't try to hide them anymore by the time we meet her in the books. I suppose having really short hair cuts down on how tangled it gets in the water. She's almost done, I just need her outfit. Dianda is usually described wearing blouses or dresses that magically change length depending on whether she has legs or a tail, but I thought something a bit more nautical would be fun. Basing my plans off Bernadette Banner's video on constructing a classic pirate shirt, I took a creamy white, silky rayon fabric and layered it with a glittery midnight blue tulle for the body, then I used the tulle to make sleeves with arm slits that would fit over her fins. My thinking was that the tulle would look both a bit like netting and like scales, and the tulle sleeves do a lovely job showing off her arm scales. This was kind of a nightmare to sew. Tulle is not super forgiving to start with, and it slipped all over the place when it was layered over the rayon. But I persevered, ending up with a lovely long blouse that I then sewed little seed beads all over to make it look like it was encrusted with pearls, and added a larger pearl bead to the collar. I felt like the outfit was a little bit lacking, so I dug out the black faux leather I used for Loki's outfit and made a corset following Requiem Arts Design's pattern at the last minute. The faux leather turned out to be stretchy enough that I didn't need to modify the pattern to fit over this modified doll. Lastly, she needs some tail fins. I had some stretchy iridescent spandex fabric in these gorgeous green, blue, and purple tones that was absolutely perfect. To make her fins, I made a pattern by tracing around some wire bent into the shape I wanted, then sewed the pieces into a little pouch, set the wires in, and stitched the wires into place around the edges. This makes them posable and keeps them from getting too wrinkly. The exposed ends of the wire get trimmed down, smeared with E9000 glue, and inserted into the holes in this last tail segment. With that, Dianda is done and ready for assembly. I really, really like how she came out. Each time I do a doll, I try to do something a little bit different and play with new techniques. It helps to keep me growing as an artist, and it helps keep things from feeling stale. Dianda was a great project, simple but definitely something new. And I got to pay homage to one of my favorite book series in the process. I think she's a great piece for MerMay, and she was definitely a nice break after how complex some of my recent dolls have been. I'm going to need that palette cleanser. What I have in mind for my next doll is going to be interesting. Thank you so much for joining me here on Silver Griffin Makes a Thing. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe because it really helps to grow the channel. Materials will be in the description box below, and stay tuned for a look at Mizutsune. So I was really looking forward to Mizutsune. About a year ago, I was pondering doll plans and seeing that a lot of other doll artists have coordinated series of dolls. Delightful had her excellent Evolution and Dragon series, the Doll Fairy has a Pokemon series and her ongoing Disney Parks collections, Deanna over at Middle Rabbit Dolls has a really fantastic tarot series, and there's loads more. I sat and thought for a while thinking that, hey, I should do a series too. It would be fun and could be a really good way to bring more people to the channel. The question was, what to make? I didn't really want to duplicate something that others were doing, even if their series happened to be about things that I loved. And then it hit me. What's a franchise I adore with lots of wild and intricate designs that would be super cool to make dolls out of? Monster Hunter. Once I hit on that notion, the first monster that came to mind was Mizutsune, the Bubble Fox Wyvern. Technically classified as a leviathan, this serpentine fox-like monster features a stunning iridescent pink and purple color scheme, a graceful design, and a giant fluffy tail. I mean, come on, who doesn't love a giant fluffy tail? The armor and weapons you make from this monster are amazing too, with strong traditional Japanese themes, kimono-style elements in the armor, kabuki mask elements in the helmets, and beautiful Sakura-themed weapons. I got to sketching and in about 5 minutes flat sketched up this elegant design. Yep, that dress is based on the roughly kimono dress by Moonlight Jewel that a lot of other artists have used for their dolls. It's a fantastic and super pretty pattern that she features in Sewing Miniature Doll Clothing Volume 2. While I didn't do color studies, I knew I wanted to keep 2 pinks, purples, and creams to match the original monster. I didn't even change much along the way. The final design is quite close to my sketch. I love her so much. Like, seriously, she's probably my favorite doll ever now. I used a Viperine Gorgon doll as the base specifically for her pale, peachy pink skin tone and her beautiful scale sculpting. There's no Apoxie Sculpt mods on this doll, or even much painting. I just blushed her body in pinks and purples that looked absolutely stunning on her base skin tone, then highlighted her sculpt with a brush of gold Interference Paint. For her face, I applied a few layers of white pastel. I wasn't going for a fully opaque white in this case. Instead, I wanted a lighter, softer look, like she just dusted her face with rice powder. Then I used watercolor pencils to sketch these patterns around her eyes, drawing inspiration from kabuki masks designed for fox characters, but making them pink and purple to keep with her theme. Her hair is in 3 different metallic shades, running from pale pink to hot pink to purple. Her head fins are made from a heavy iridescent fabric I found in the cosplay section at Joann's, and her claws, which are one of Mizutsune's major notable features, were made from dabbing hot glue onto the tip of each finger and drawing it out into a claw shape as it cooled. For her tail, I made a basic posable tail by sewing a closed-ended tube of fabric, sliding it over a wire armature, and stuffing it with leftover fluff from making yarn wefts. The iridescent spikes are the same material as her head fins. Over it all, I glued wefts of brushed pink and purple yarn. These were trimmed down and shaped to resemble the Mizutsune's fluffy tail. For her outfit, I went with the ruffly version of Moonlight Jewel's kimono dress in these pretty purple print fabrics, using the same cream-colored fabric I used in Dianda's shirt for the inner skirt, and pink satin ribbon for the outer ruffles. The obi and the trim were made with a coordinating purple and silver fabric. Ruffles take so long to sew by hand. For the sash, I braided some pink and gold embroidery thread from my stash and made some pretty dangling charms out of pearl, rose quartz, and opalescent glass beads. Last of all, I used air dry clay to mold some soles for her sandals, glued ribbon around them, and topped them off with craft foam, then tied them in place with some more embroidery thread. She's definitely one of my prettiest dolls to date, and I'm really sad I was unable to make a full video of her creation. I don't even know how that setting got turned on my phone, but now I know to check it before filming so I don't lose a whole doll's worth of footage ever again. She goes really well with Kezu from the first Monster Hunter High video, and I'm really excited to continue this series. No, I'm not going to tell you just what I have planned for the next Monster Hunter High doll. I wouldn't want to whip you into a frenzy. See you next time on Silver Griffin Makes a Thing, where we make whatever we feel like at the moment.